In this section, I intend to elucidate some important issues with occasional repeats, analysis, and a little more detail not previously mentioned. Briefly drifting into my thoughts, I pondered on the unusual developments in my life since returning from Perth, the time I spent in St. Kilda, and my disastrous time in Chelsea Heights. Remembering the last moments of my stay at Edita's, the whole wretched scene came alive when I loaded the last of my belongings into the van, and the moment she arrived home. She was bewildered seeing me move out, asking, "What's going on?" That was my final farewell, while thinking it was good to know you. As previously mentioned, my final words were, "You don't deserve a person who is the lowest of the lowest kind of a man." Did she realize that I was repeating her words? Had she already conveniently forgotten? I looked directly into her eyes as I uttered them, and she stood motionless for a moment, probably shocked about how serious I was. I felt sad that humans could be so cruel to one another without any feeling. As I walked to the van, I was unsure if she said anything audible, but I felt the words in my mind as if she was speaking to me. "But nobody called you like that?" Knowing what I knew, without any opposition or judgment, she was very capable of denying what she said, having made a character reference about me in front of her sunshine. I have never been a person who supported falsehood, contrary to the ideals of Jehovah's Witnesses and my daughter's lies spoken against me in favor of their mentally conditioned mother's belief. As in a German proverb, lies have indeed very short legs and cannot run fast. I was certain that Edita would soon forget why I left. I had no desire or any reason to tolerate being classified as the lowest of the lowest kind of a man. It was indeed a very ugly assault on my person, especially after being unexpectedly hindered with all my undertakings in every possible way. However, I will repeat myself, after discovering what I was dealing with, it was far better to live on the streets than live under those circumstances for another day. I still wish her well, and hope that nobody else has been or will be hurt any more. Alas, my dwelling on the streets was unnecessarily prolonged after leaving Chelsea Heights, and I was forced to measure the street corners a little longer, extremely exhausted and sleepless. I could not tell anything about my unfortunate state to anyone. It was a torment unbearable. The prospect of moving into some form of housing did not look promising. I had inspected a number of dwellings, and most of them were unsuitable for human habitation. One of them topped them all. It was truly derelict and broken to pieces. As mentioned, even the outside was visible through large gaps in the floorboards and corners of almost every room. Some real estate agents must have regarded me as a special case, considering those inhabitable dwellings suitable for the needy. I am not including their names for ethical reasons. They may have seen me as they imagined, not a human being. Perhaps a single poor man of ethnic background, or simply somebody naive enough to accept housing which was falling apart. But in the meantime, some rental benefit could be squeezed out of them. Was I meant to become like those homeless people sitting on street corners and begging for money? Was walking the streets at night on empty for a long time not enough? On the other hand, while I conducted those meditation sessions, I was determined never to say anything to anyone, only hoping I might receive donations for my efforts as a token of appreciation. I was extremely stressed out and embarrassed about the situation, while pretending that everything was in order. My money being frozen for a short period of time did not help. It seems that someone had been trying to access my account unlawfully. My inability to apply for social benefits due to not being housed also did not help, but I kept my head up, just like my mother used to advise us. Even if your collar is dirty, keep your head always up. I learned the true meaning behind her words, especially then. Edita was still visiting Malak discreetly, and who knows what lies she was feeding her with. Who knows what Margaret was also telling her. They all imagined and had their own opinions about me, without knowing anything regarding my personal circumstances. Probably they were following the advice of kick the fallen man, which was a commonly used phraseology amongst locals. When anybody asked me where I lived, I resorted to politely decline answering, for my current address could be anywhere on the streets. In reality, I was living in an enormously large, and at the same time, tiny bubble. Nobody knew who I was, where and when I was. Only once was I asked after the gathering by someone if I needed transport home, and you can guess what my response was. I preferred the long hours of walking until the next morning. Occasionally being stopped by the police, asking me their usual questions. It became a routine for the homeless. During this time, my health was also impacted, as I had to put up with a hernia situation, needing to wear a special corset to help me with my discomfort. This was to last for a while yet, that is until I was housed in a small attachment to the family home of a very friendly couple in Springvale. However, having received my belongings from the storage company, I discovered I had so many things which had to be squeezed into that small dwelling. Alas, not much room was left for me, but at least I was able to dedicate part of the lounge room to create oil paintings. I was happy about finally being housed, but could do far better in a large place. I still could not invite anybody to my humble residence, for fear of being criticized, pitied, or advised that I should be housed somewhere better. From then on, I became more isolated than before. I could only express my real self to others the way they discovered me in the outside world. But my hidden lifestyle, which was forced upon me, remained unknown to them. This included all members of my family who had divorced me under the careful supervision of the witnesses. I could close my eyes to all those circumstances, for there were more important issues. For instance, I had to have my hernias surgically corrected. On the other hand, the Social Security's Department, as it was known then, was pressurizing me to undertake a government-assisted business study towards establishing my own financial security, which I gladly accepted, as I thought it was a good opportunity. I was extremely happy to have my only companion, Blinky, back with me. She was certainly a long-lasting senior, and very slow in movement due to her advanced years. And I hoped she would last a little longer than normally expected. I was thinking how this little pet could be the greatest friend one could tell one's stories to, for although she could not understand our unique human speech, when I had tears rolling down my cheeks, she rubbed herself around my legs, sat next to me, and purred. It was almost like telling me there is nothing to worry about in life. For the outsider, it would appear as just insignificant. In fact, many people I had encountered would consider any closeness to a pet as abnormal, and many in the past most certainly thought of me as requiring psychological help when there was definitely no need for it. This was also one of the reasons why I chose to remain extremely private, along with some people's wrongful judgments, amplified by the multitude of lies spoken against me by my closest. In reality, I was wrong, thinking of them as my closest, for by their behavior they proved to be far from it. In regard to my black Burmese, I can confidently declare that she had also been targeted and treated as an unwanted thing, just like me being considered as odd, different, and unwanted. My ex-wife had a very distinct disliking against this cat, probably because it was mine. My daughters, when very young and in their teens, treated the poor animal harshly, which might have been after encouragement from their mother, being bitter against my alleged dishonesty and other unspeakable characteristics, especially after our separation and her disguised hatred. Because the cat was black, it could be charmed, as in black magic. This belief was confirmed by a number of witnesses. In short, due to the completely ungrounded fears of superstitious people, anything that was black or gray could be judged in this unusual light. Even when living in Chelsea Heights, the poor cat was not really welcome, and sadly I was surrounded by such people for a long time. As I briefly mentioned before, Wendy was keenly interested in starting a close relationship with me, but I was desperately in need of grounding myself while rediscovering me in the real world. There were too many issues needing to be considered about my individual self and place in the world. She loved being close to me, and this seemed to make Muriel feel hopeful that her husband would be freer from the avid attention. She felt that my involvement with Wendy could save her marriage. Nothing to this effect has actually been voiced. However, as observed, the behavior of all parties declared more than words could explain. I was determined not to question the situation, but was not feeling comfortable when my hands were grabbed by Wendy every time I visited Muriel's for their weekly gatherings. Alas, how I felt was ignored, and I was uneasy about the ungrounded hopes and empty dreams. It was a fantasy about an unfulfillable future engagement in a permanent relationship. I was becoming more shattered and devastated within my silence, drowning in hopelessness, nobody noticing anything. There were occasions when I was asked to spend a little time sitting on the seats in the backyard only to have my hands held, and many questions directed about our dreamt-of future with Wendy. If I had no other issues to deal with and had not been burnt by a woman I once loved, maybe I might have felt differently. Although I never wanted to hurt anybody, what choice did I have? I could not continue with a dream relationship. I did not know how to get around it without hurt. After I made my intention clear, I discovered Wendy commencing another, and probably more meaningful, relationship with a French gentleman. When I met the pair, Wendy expressed a form of fear towards me, behaving as if I would be very jealous and start an unwanted situation. But when she discovered that it was not the case, she and her new boyfriend were relaxed. On discovering me wishing them all the happiness, they were both very surprised, but I still wondered why others who were my supposed friends, had to dictate my terms of living. Maybe they were considering my ethnicity and accented speech, judging me as if I needed their directions to live a life according to their liking. I noticed a cold attitude from Muriel towards me from then on. It felt as if I had caused a great disappointment in her mind, and one could guess why. Wendy told me she had been married with her current partner for about 18 years at the time, but they hardly had any proper relationship, and had a young daughter she called her little Tartlet. Her house was also like a mini farm. I gave the young girl a tiny black and white portable television, which had once been given to me by my eccentric friend Andreas as a gift to pass on to somebody else, and she was ecstatic. Wendy continued to meet at Muriel's for their regular get-togethers with her close friend Crossingham, conducting ritualistic and traditional American Indian practices of smudging, drumming, and speaking as inspired by the keepers of the truth from a higher dimension. They were keen on producing and selling dream catchers. Crossingham had a Native American artifacts and bookshop, and was desirous to publish a book. They asked me to illustrate her book, and I created a series of illustrations. But after discovering that I was not developing any relationship with Wendy, they decided not to go ahead with the project, thus leaving me with those illustrations and graphics. They used to talk enthusiastically about Native American sweat lodges and their unique experiences. They spoke of an American Indian who desired to copulate with blonde Australian girls to spread native seeds everywhere around the world, as apparently prophesied. I was not at all disturbed about the whole issue, for I developed a habit of blessing those who hurt me. As I said before, I had other things to worry about. About this time, Margaret had done her part in destroying my reputation completely with the meditation group I was conducting on a voluntary basis. Edita added her poison of naming me as her sexual partner within the same when visiting them discreetly. Wendy, on the other hand, claimed that her then close friend Archie, her wonderful lover, as she put it, had taken a picture of her with an accidental optical illusion, which they all believed to be nature spirits and fairies circling her body. This image was taken in her backyard. Knowing that everyone is capable of influencing matter with their minds, using thought energy, as with Japan's Dr. Emado's experiments with water molecules, where he proved the validity of thoughts influencing material things. I decided to duplicate the same, conducting my own experiments by influencing photographic film within people's cameras purely by thought. I discovered with repeatable experiments that thoughts could create different images on photographs. Deliberately desired imagery could also be incorporated in single-shot images. As discovered, some were cheating by double-exposing their photographs, claiming they have captured spirit images or UFOs, but several laboratory tests revealed the reality. My humble equipment was not suitable for creating double exposures, as the frames would not align properly, and the result was disastrous. However, pictures taken in single exposures with one click after their negatives had been subjected to thought energy fields yielded different outcomes. What Archie has photographed with that optical addition around Wendy could only have been generated by the jewelry she was wearing or by water droplets on the camera lens. Following exhaustive testing, it was proved that what was claimed was not so, but nothing to the contrary could be told to the people involved. On another occasion, when visiting Muriel and Archie, I discovered an unused roll of film which they and Wendy claimed to have fallen out of my pocket, but it was certainly not mine, and I left it with them. Some time later, Wendy told me what happened when Archie attempted to load his camera with it. As soon as we offered him his tea, while he was loading it into his camera, the roll of film fell into his cup. I still think the film was yours, and was probably exposed. He was not meant to take photos with it, because I think you have planted it there, because it would be cheating. I wondered what reason I had to cheat, or help somebody else appear as if cheating. She asked me again. You tell me, while putting her hot, sweaty hands on both of my cheeks. From then on, I was not going to put up with it any longer. This was an ultimate assault on my person. Long before that event, Archie had taken double exposures with his camera while visiting the St. Kilda Festival with his grandson, and almost all his exposures contained my faded images as additional elements. I did not provide those negatives to him, and certainly did not pre-expose them to my images. I believe some extreme thought energy might have been utilized, or he might have taken my images using the same negative film accidentally in his camera. But the tests, as they claimed, revealed that those images were produced with single-click shots on his own negative films. However, neither Wendy nor any of the others involved with that experience took it seriously, and absolutely nothing was spoken about it. They only spoke about what a miracle Archie's photograph of Wendy was. With regard to my images appearing in his pictures, one questions whether someone wanted to create the illusion unbeknownst to me. I was struggling with my finances at the time, and the ability to buy films for others would be impossible. I felt that because they did not achieve their objective, and I did not become Wendy's lover, they had to create excuses to punish me. Upon this, I made it clear that I did not want to have anything further to do with any of them, and ceased attending their meetings. It was going to be their loss, not mine. They could not come up with any satisfactory explanation about the additional images appearing in their photographs. A few other people had also been capturing unusual imagery incorporated into their pictures. One of them was Edita, but she was incapable of manipulating them, as she did not possess a sophisticated camera. Hers was an average quality to capture snapshots only. It was truly astounding to see additional images appear in her photographs, similar to what I have been able to do with my 35mm Pentax. I had captured images of Lucky, who died due to old age, while I was still staying in Chelsea Heights, but those images appeared after the cat was gone. They usually appeared on occasions, such as birthday celebrations we were invited to at Edita's friends, and occasionally at home in Chelsea Heights. However, after I was no longer there, she was privately showing to people what she had so far collated. This way she created quite an interest in those so-called ghost images. One day, when she was showing me those printed images of Lucky, I told her light-heartedly, without much thinking, that perhaps the cat had a message from the other side, and was probably thinking of her, wanting to return back. I believe she took that seriously. However, what later happened when I was living in Springvale was something I had no absolute proof or explanation for. I will tell you about it soon. It was about this time I discovered a very neglected and starving cat in the shopping center. I decided to take the poor animal home, and washed its completely muddied fur and started feeding her. It must have often remained outside and kept sneezing, but I was not able to take her to the veterinary clinic. And people I was talking to said that probably the animal was so very sick that it was dying anyway. Indeed, one morning I found her in front of my door, lying motionless on its side, eyes half emptied, and it had been bleeding from its nose. When I inquired about what could have happened to the poor animal, I was told that it was probably a form of cancer they could not be able to help. I felt so saddened that I still feel the pain of it even today. I always wished that animals would be looked after by intelligent and caring humans, but a typically biased citizen told me, "We do not like cats here, for they are bad for our native animals." My meditation and discussion group at Melek's had finally come to an end after the undesirable participation of friends like Margaret, Edita, and Wendy, as well as Melek with her ungrounded worries. I was seen as an immoral element within their allegedly wholesome and divine get-togethers, since I did not follow the great guru's teachings, and was therefore no longer welcome. After Wendy's input, yet another roll of film was found, where I had my last meditation group, and I was also accused of having dropped it there purposely, but I did not. However, I was to take at least one roll of film to the photo lab, but it was missing, and I was unsure where I had lost it. The roll of film found there was by Fuji, whereas the one I was looking for was Kodak. Is it not interesting how people want to own someone and then judge them according to groundless gossip? Was there something to learn from this involvement, for I had similar experiences before? Why did I attract such judgmental people? It really was beyond me. Was I regarded as being naive, or was there something else I was yet to discover? After those select friends' input, I was judged as being false, or like someone who played games with them. Perhaps, just perhaps, my ex-wife was the real witch, and did not realize yet, was capable of cursing me while keeping me under her wicked spells, under the guise of righteousness. I was aware of her constant prayers to her God, asking favors in regard to me and the children. Was she, in reality, worshipping what she most feared, the one masquerading as Jehovah? On the other hand, I never sought fame, glory, or recognition from any of my friends or associates. I never wanted to collect worshippers, considering their interests above my own when conducting those group activities. I always prefer to help people help themselves find their own value in the real world, hoping they will be able to free themselves from forms of intolerance and dogma. I always want people to think, be inventive, and creative. However, a few great friends, as they consider themselves, could not accept being other than above everybody else, all knowledgeable, always correct, even though they were far removed from what they truly wanted to be recognized as. Obviously, I needed to be painted as fake, thanks to such wonderful friends. Was it not Magda who initially desired to see me like that? I was indeed in the world, but not of the world. Repeating myself, Wendy had asked me to help her with portrait expressions, for she wanted to do psychic drawings at mind, body, and spirit festivals. From time to time, I attended those festivals, hoping to draw portraits of people for a small fee, while a number of them demanded that I should draw the images of imagined persons around them. Interestingly, they recognized my drawings as their deceased relatives. Some even wanted to show me their old photographs to prove how authentic my portraits were. If my works have helped them to cope with their loss, at least in a psychological consideration, I can only be happy. Unfortunately, I have also discovered a number of other artists who were there only to make money, while feeding people with their multiple guesses, their own fears, and indeed many lies. Many so-called psychics were doing cold reading, making others believe how genuine they were. In reality, they were only out there to make money. There were also psychic artists, without being so, and yet capable of generating a substantial income. Although I could paint imagined or inspired images of people's relatives who were no longer living, yet claimed to exist elsewhere, I still had my reservations, for there were so many unknowns. Then again, if my works provided people with some consolation, I could only feel happy. When I was valued and paid for my work, I was content. However, some of the psychic artists were unhappy about my input, maybe due to their ungrounded, personalized jealousies, without admitting it. They obviously did not feel comfortable with perceived competition. Only a few appeared to be genuine, but the others were making comparisons between their mediocre works and my portraits, like those few so-called psychics who preferred to think down on me, for they realized how sincere and genuine I was. This is by no means a complaint, for in reality I was discreetly psychoanalyzing people without letting them know about my professional background. But those psychics' guesses or alleged readings had to be the only genuine ones.